Hey there, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm the host of my new podcast, Pause and Rewind. I'll be chatting to changemakers, thought leaders, and role models who all share a common goal. They're striving to make the world a more inclusive place. And let's face it, we need it. Each guest has a unique story when it comes to doing their thing, and we often know who people are in the now. But how much do we really know about them? Pause and Rewind takes a moment to explore the experiences in my guest's life that led them to where and who they are now. Because everyone loves an origin story. We'll dive into tales, anecdotes, and what makes our guests tick. So, are you ready to pause and rewind? Hey there, and welcome to this episode of Pause and Rewind, where I am chatting to my friend Woosh Raza. Woosh is an HR professional, and he has recently decided to go it alone, and set up his own consultancy, Woosh Limited. I know Woosh socially, and it was really great to sit and chat with him about all things Woosh, from his career trajectory through to our love of fashion, his passion for Rihanna. You're going to hear it. And just, all things Woosh, like I said. Woosh also has his own podcast, Rainbows and Bullshit, which I was a guest on earlier this year before I launched my podcast, and it definitely influenced a segment of mine around people's sayings that they live by and sayings that they put in the bin. It was something that I brought to his podcast. But I just love the way that Woosh is so energetic, so loud and proud, and you're going to hear why. So enjoy, take care of yourself whilst listening. We do cover some challenging topics, but it's a great conversation. Let me know what you think. Cheers. Hey Woosh, it is great to see you. Welcome to Pause and Rewind.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel honored.
Well, I was so pleased to jump on your podcast earlier this year, Rainbows and Bullshit. I highly recommend listening to Woosh's podcast. It was so much fun being a guest. And actually, part of that podcast, I kind of like the bit that I introduced on that podcast, that I've kind of taken into this one. So yeah, it's just so wonderful to see you. And it was great to see you on Wednesday too.
I loved it. Yes, I mean you are. Every time I see you, like literally, you fill my cup with joy. And the event on Wednesday that you had was phenomenal. Such a great conversation, and I'm really glad I went. So thank you so much for inviting me onto your show. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited that
Oh,
it's
well, right back at you. Like you always are a beaming light. And the event that Wish came to, that I organised, but I was also on the panel, was focusing on midlife queers, and actually ageism was something that we tackled during the conversation on your podcast. I'm going to start with a big question, Woosh, which I ask every guest. What does the world look like for Woosh Raza right now?
I laugh it, right? Because it's like I've literally just stepped into freelance to being a freelance consultant. So I think if I had to describe the world for me right now, I think it would be absolutely crazy. Lots of sleepless nights, lots of inspiration coming from every single kind of, everywhere I'm going. What else does the world look like for me right now? I think it's scary, but good scary. Like I'm a big believer in, like, if you're not scared, then it's not worth it. I guess that really translates to every part of my life, really. So I'm a big risk taker, and this is huge, but yeah, very, very scary, but very exciting time.
I love the risk taking. I am so risk averse, which I think some people are quite shocked when they hear me say that. I'm such a risk averse person, and people often kind of say to me, "Oh, why don't you go it alone when it comes to events?" And I think it is that big, just knowing the unknown. Also, I'm shit at admin, but it is a massive change that you've gone through. What prompted it?
Oh, good question. I think for me, there's a few things really. Working in the kind of space, well, you know this because you're in the same kind of similar space. I think um, kind of becoming institutionalized is a byproduct of staying in an organization for a certain period, right? Anywhere that you go. And it's not a bad thing, like to be institutionalized, but it very much happens. And I felt myself in that kind of space. And for me, I really wanted to kind of create something meaningful that meant I could dip in and out of loads of different like things, because that's just my personality. I go in, I supercharge things, I bring the energy and the passion, and then I get bored. And then I'm like, I need to just move on to my next challenge. And so this aligns perfectly in terms of being able to be, freelance and work with lots of different clients. I get to go in and troubleshoot and really zoom in and zoom out of different places. And that was something that I was thinking about for ages. But like you, the fear I had was around the admin as well. Like I totally get it with the admin. Like I'm still grappling with that. I'm shit.
Mm.
But it's also like the fact that everything is like going to rest on like, I'm like my own brand. I'm like my own thing. Like, this is me. And so I think I got to the end of this. I mean, I've been through lots of challenges, and I think I got to the end of the summer, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to just do this. And I just wanted to take that leap. And so that's kind of what I did.
Do you know what? I'm just picking up on the words that you're using there, and you've like leap and zoom and supercharge. And the things that come into me is like whoosh by name, whoosh by nature, because you really are just like this lightning bolt.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And that's actually how I describe my name. So when someone says, oh, like, what's your name? I'm like, Wish. And I'm like, I try and stick to my name as much as
I
possible.
love it.
Can you imagine a Wish that was just really slow and like, really, I mean, that might be an interesting version of Wish, but like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe my name has shaped my out, like my energy and my approach. But yeah, I guess it's always kind of been part and parcel of who I am. So
Well, don't fucking change ever, because love it, and I know you won't, so it's all good. So, what can people expect from Whoosh Limited?
oh, very good question. And so I'm a month in, just over a month into kind of consultancy life. And the reason I kind of I'm doubling down on Wish Limited is and I know the name isn't very creative, but it's just like it's my name, and I was like, I'm just gonna whack it on my business. But like I guess what most people can expect is, and the things that I think that I'm really passionate about is, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Of course, many of us who do this work do this because we have lived experience, right?
Mm.
Of difference. We have lived experience of whatever it is that we bring. We want the world to be a better place. And so, really, for me, what I'm trying to do through my consultancy is to connect that passion and energy for making the world a better place through everything I've learned from an HR practice perspective in terms of culture change, and reform. So, really, through kind of my approach, I look at it from how you drive cultural change using your lens of lived experience. And so that's a really unique position that puts me in terms of being able to support clients, I guess, on both their HR support and their ED&I journey. So I guess that's kind of the reason and the driver for the work that I do. And I guess people can expect, honesty. I'm very good at kind of coming in and giving you a view fairly quickly, diplomatic. I've got a lot of energy to kind of come into it, lots of supercharging. So yeah, I mean, these are some of the kind of, I guess, USPs of kind of working with me in that kind of capacity.
It's so exciting to see it all unfold. I love the brand that you built, and it's really colourful, which is unsurprising. And just yeah, I'm so excited to see it. Um, Obviously, I know that you live, breathe what you do, right? You're so passionate about it. We've had personal conversations about it. We've had professional conversations about it. With the world the way it is right now, right? With on this podcast, we've talked about it. I've talked about it with many guests. People have used the terms "feels like the world's on fire." It feels like the world's a bit of a shit show. How are you looking after yourself right now?
Really good question. And yeah, like, I've shared, I have a lot of love for you. And actually, we've had some really thought-provoking conversations as well. I remember, like, we went to, what was it? Was it The Bridge?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, down
just
the
down the
road.
road.
And I remember opening up to you in a way, because you have this amazing, disarming kind of personality that makes you open up. And so, I really appreciate the question, because it reminds me of some of those um, aspects of the conversations that I'm trying to work through in my life. And so, yeah, it is a dark place right now, and it is, and obviously, we really have to go far, like the elections last week, and in the
Mm.
US. lots of the genocide in the Middle East. There's lots of global conflict, geopolitical thing, lots happening. Our own political systems. I think for me, the I go back to what's within my influence, circle of influence and circle of control, I think. And so really, if there's anything that I can kind of say to that notion is look at what your within your realm of influence and what's within your realm of control, because there's so many things that are outside of all of our control right now. So it's good to double down on what you can actually support and influence. And it might look something as simple as, I don't know, being able to like paint the color, like paint your room a different color, or do something that you feel is going to give you a little bit of joy, and that's your own little world. And I think that's and a lot of people will probably disagree with my view to be like, it's time to roll up our sleeves and get the work done, and we have to like be really passionate. And I agree with all of that. I think absolutely don't give up on what we're doing. But right now I think tend to our corners of the world, and just make your life that much more beautiful, even if it's small little things like going for a walk or getting a coffee, or catching up with a friend you haven't spoken to in a long time. Just those small acts of kindness for yourself, I think, is so important right now.
Absolutely. I often say that if you don't tap into the joy for yourself, how can you show up for other people?
Exactly.
We have to look after ourselves. Obviously a lot of what's going in the world on in the world is impacting our roles within DEI, right? You're seeing budget cuts, you're seeing anti-woke, anti-DEI rhetoric, DEI fatigue, um, and questions around the future. However, the research all shows that DEI is needed more than ever. When you look at Gen Z and millennials, for example, they are
Yeah.
opting for work for companies that have policies, procedures, inclusion at the very forefront of their being. Research shows that DEI is not only the ethical thing to do, it is good for business. How are you tackling that anti-woke rhetoric, particularly as you launch your new venture?
Yeah, it's a really astute reflection. I think I spoke at a COPD panel last week, actually, at the annual conference, and in the panel that I was speaking to was about sustaining momentum in career. So it was all about intergenerational, and I know you're a big fan of intergenerational and ages, looking at ageism as around. And I think it's so important that we double down on what that means. We have 5 generations now working in the same time in any workplace, which is the first time in history. And there are different, as you've said, there are differing views on like what you can expect from work. So you have younger people coming into the workplace that will very happily just switch and just like move to another employer if they're not getting what they need. So this is now becoming a commercial issue just as much as it's like the nice thing to do, because people are clear about what's your approach, where do you stand on these issues. So yeah, we've got I think we're at a time where got lots of different people coming and working alongside each other. And the challenge I have around ED&I, the word and term ED&I, and as you rightly say, people kind of growing tired of it and people dropping that from their agendas or moving forward because, things haven't, they don't see any kind of progress, is the concept, the challenges that are ED&I is tackling, for example, anti-racism, homophobia, transphobia, gender equity, social mobility. These are huge aspects of societal discrimination that have been around for hundreds of years. And so you're not going to solve them in like, a nice little KPI and like come to the end of the year and go, yeah, look at us, we're anti-racist now. It's going to take work and it's going to take time and it's going to take effort. So one of the things I always think about and I spoke on this issue around last week, was around how you can advance those aims, but not by necessarily saying it's an ED&I thing, but actually making it about your cultural journey and about the way that you're positioning these issues. Because if you weave your ED&I practice across every aspect of your organization, it doesn't become ED&I sitting in a box over here. It becomes, this is a core, this is who we are, and this is core to our organization, and it becomes kind of much more entrenched in terms of who you are as an organization. So those are some of the reflections that I kind of shared last week, and I think it's important because this is happening across the world, with ED&I, the ED&I agenda.
Yeah, it does need a shake up, but I think you're right. Co-production, collaboration, and building it into every facet of your organization. Which I'm so excited to dive into your origin story. But before I do, I just want to tap into something that brings us both joy, and it is part of the way that you show up, and particularly when you are doing your speaking gigs, and that is fashion. Like I love how much energy and the attention and joy that you take from throwing an outfit together. Tell
I
it,
mean,
tell us about that.
I'm talking to someone who I admire greatly for their fashion. Like Neil, you smash it out of the park. The suits that you wear and like the color that you bring into it as well. Like you're a mate. Like you are like gold for me. Like I'm like, oh my god. Like
Well,
literally, I'm like I
same.
rock up in like. I mean, so I yeah. Thank you for asking the question because I'm like a huge fan of your fashion and flair. I think I think really where it comes from with fashion. I'll talk more about it in the origin stuff because you ask about Little Woosh and stuff, right? Like for me growing up and stuff. So I think that kind of part of my identity has always been about how I show up and like kind of fashion as well. But I think life is too short. Is that's kind of where I'm at, like to act or to dress in a way that doesn't reflect who you are. And so I remember at the start of this year, we were at a board meeting and I had like this sheer like shirt on, like with like a bow tie and stuff like that. And you can see my nipples through the shirt. Obviously was a byproduct of wearing it, but it was right in the smack of winter and I was negotiating pay negotiations for the executive team and for the organization. And one of the exec directors, when we were having a drink after that board meeting, was like, I've never seen anyone negotiate a pay rise with their nipples out. like, I was like, yes, like I'm trying to bring different views of like how you can do things, but with like different fashion. Because HR typically as well is a very corporate, like kind of part of the organization. And so to kind of bring some energy and flair into that space, I think,
Yeah.
is important. So I mean yeah. I love experimenting like you. I love pushing the boundaries of like, and also gender, like, looking at kind of different things that I wear and actually just pushing the boundaries of it because it's so important that we commit to ourselves and honor ourselves in terms of who we are and what we and who we are, but also role model that for people who are aspiring into that because I never had that and I don't know about you, but I never really had that kind of growing up, especially in the workplace. I never really had that frame of reference to be like, oh yeah, I can like be like that and I can dress like that. So I think it's so important for those two reasons, really.
Yeah. I love it. Disrupt, disrupt, disrupt.
Absolutely.
Whoosh, let's dive into your origin story. Are you ready to pause and rewind?
Okay, let's do
Here we
it.
go. Take me back. Tell me all about Little Whoosh.
Oh god. Wow, on the couch with Neil. So I think what I'll say, growing up, little I mean, I grew up, so I was born in Crawley near Brighton, West Sussex. And then I was there for about first 9, 10 years of my life. And then we moved to Manchester. And that's kind of where I developed my sense of identity and self in the sense, because that was my teenage years in Manchester. And then we moved back to London. So Little Wish, I'd say, and I'm thinking about it now, I was very shy. I was very shy up until the age of about year 10, about 15, if I'm being really honest, very, very shy. And like people, whenever I tell them that or when I share that, I'm like, what? Like, really? And I'm like, yeah, like I was really, really shy. I remember like running behind my mum, like, and just like peering from like the side of my mum, like when we had guests come in. And I was just like, I was a very shy child. But I was also very cheeky. And I've always had this like little cheeky flair in me, which I had as a little kid. Um, and so those would be some of the kind of earliest reflections about kind of my personality. I remember being super creative and loving just being different creative. So this one memory that I will always kind of not forget, like it was kind of etched in my brain, was did you remember Star Wars? Do you remember the new Star Wars films with like Natalie Portman in as
Yeah.
Queen Amidala and stuff like. So I remember when that came out, right? And like Queen Amidala, right, would have like all these different outfits on in the film, and I'd be like, oh my god, like she'd wear like all these really crazy outfits. And I remember like going out to play on the streets with the kids. And I remember like going out for like 10, I just time it. So I used to like go out for 10 minutes, run back home, change my outfit, go back out, give it 10 more minutes, run back in to try and do all these different outfits. Cause I'd be like, oh my God, like I'm obsessed with Queen Amidala. So like I used to, my mind was amazing in the sense that I always like kind of drew inspiration from like being creative and different and flamboyant. And so I remember that from a very young age. And then the final thing I'd say, just in terms of like little, motivation growing up and the childhood, was I was very, very curious. So I was always like really fascinated with like just everything. Like I'd ask questions. I'd be that person that asks that little kid that's asking all those questions that you're like, oh, just shut up. Do you know what I mean? But like that would be me. I remember when I was in year 5 and we had to draw the skeleton and we had to map it out and stuff. I remember like writing all these questions and speaking to my dad late into the night, and I was like, what's that bone do over here? Like I was so like kind of all curious about life and just the world. So I think those are some of the earliest kind of traits I think from little Woosh.
Do you, how connected do you feel to Little Woosh now?
More so now than I think I felt in a long time. I think I completely disconnected from Little. I mean, I had no connection to my childhood. I think probably for most of my 20s, and that looking back at that is really sad because
Mm.
I've only really in the last 5 years been started to reconnect with that part of myself. I've got like poison ivy. I've got like all my because you've been to my house and stuff like so. Like I've got like in my hallway now. I've got like loads of photos of like so. I've got like the Batman films which I grew up watching and just kind of connected back to it through my space as well. Which has been an absolute joy. But yeah, I would say I do feel quite more connected now than I've ever been.
I think we disconnect because I think that as queer people, we lose ourselves along the way
Yeah,
growing up in those growing up phases
yeah,
of kind of like, policing ourselves, whether that's our
absolutely.
voices, our movement, our bodies, through to kind of trying to hide who we are and not having the freedom to be who we are. And then so when we can, we start to reconnect. And I love some of this was come up in the event the other day, but when you touch in with those childlike moments and you get the moments of adolescence coming through, whether that is how you dress or kind of like what you're engaging with. I often joke about some of my music tastes like I'm a 16-year-old girl and fuck it, I don't care anymore. But I love that you're feeling that reconnection and those memories of yourself. What shifted in terms of the shyness and when?
Uh, I think I think I got to year 10. Yeah, and that's when I came out. So I can't remember coming out when I was 15. And I came out as bi before I came out as gay. Just, we like I'm sure many
Some
can
of us
relate
do.
to that kind of, yeah. And I think it was at that point that there was almost like a fuck it moment with me where I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna like do this and just live my life in a more honest way because I just didn't really feel that honest kind of until that point. And that's kind of where I kind of my personality just kind of exploded, I guess, or I like kind of just started to like explore and I just built confidence and I like became friends with like the popular group of people at school and like became like this mean girl almost. It's really weird, but like I lean into like the um I guess that part of my identity, and that kind of felt liberating. I think that was like the first step of like liberation, for me anyway. And so that kind of came with like this shift in like my nature, my personality. But I think the older I get, the more I kind of connect to that introverted, shy energy that I had as a child. It was really weird because I think I came out in this way because I felt like I was like wanting to come out in this kind of really loud bold way. And I think that creates an assumption, and you probably get this as well, like, where people think that you are a certain way because of how you present or how you talk or your confidence, etc. But the older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing there is a lot about me that is very much connected to that little like that 6 7 year old boy who was very quiet and timid and anxious, and I've always been really anxious. I've always been an anxious child, but I think I kind of I didn't have that sense of anxiety kind of when I came out, and I feel like the older I'm getting, the more anxious I'm also getting as well. And it's kind of, I guess, linked to that point you made, I think, on the panel this week about, you become aware of your own mortality, right? And you become aware of like,
Mm.
the fact that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, like I didn't see life for myself past a certain point, and now I think, okay, I'm at a point where I want to be more reflective and considerate of that. But that was when the shift happened for me. I think kind of that adolescent, you know, kind of period.
Before we dive into adolescence, because it's such a formative time for us, for all people, but particularly for queer people, it's not a happy time, right?
No.
And for many people on here, we've spoken about that. But for some people, it is. But just want to know what what's the best anecdotes you've heard about yourself, either from parents or family, when you're growing up about Little Woosh?
I remember my dad loves this story of like he used to when I was a toddler, he he used to take me to the park, and that he would like have these, I don't even know how to describe them other than like, like these like kind of like, basically it was like I don't want to say a lead because I not like he
Baby
put
Rains, Baby Rains.
yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it. Yes, 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 yes. Baby rains. And he said that I despise these baby rains. And I was always trying to fight to come out of these baby rains. And I hated it. And because he wouldn't let me go, I used to turn around and start trying to punch him to like get them off of me. And he used to look at me and he'd be like, "What are you doing?" And he looks at that with fondness. But I think I draw a lot of reflection from that story, in the sense that I've never really wanted to be contained, and I have got like that kind of rebellious nature and like resistant kind of
Yeah.
nature like in me. So I think that's something I reflect back on now in terms of like anecdotes that people share. Um,
Little fighter as well, like,
yeah,
and the way that you do speak out about injustice, unfairness and stuff, you can definitely see that kind of like, fighting for your own freedom and potentially that of others as well.
100. Absolutely. And I see like you just put like I see so much of that inside in I feel so connected to that
Yeah.
that that child now in how I kind of show up. So yeah, that's definitely a reflection that I have.
Yeah. Take that reflection rather than just being a little shit.
I know. Probably trying to punch my dad. Yeah, like take that what you will. Either it's a mental health condition.
You're all good. I mean, I have massive issues with authority, so I'm I'm with you. Um, Tell us about your teenage years. What does teenage years look and feel like for Whoosh?
Oh God. So, well, I grew up in Rochdale, like near Manchester, as in my three teenage years was there, and it was a really difficult time to grow up. I'm sure for many of us. For me, the added layer of complexity was that I was obviously growing up as first generation British Pakistani, so I was obviously having to grapple with my sexuality, but also how I fit into society from a race perspective. So that was an incredibly difficult journey to kind of navigate. And so, teenage years were hard. And I think if I was to sum up how I was in my teenage years, I think the word or the phrase fitting in was kind of
Mm,
what I would really kind of focus on. So Rochdale, for those of you that may not know, there is quite a lot of tension in Rochdale, like racial tension between especially working class, like the working class white background versus like the Pakistani community and other communities of color. And so I experienced a lot of racism in that part of my life, a lot of racism, and to then also on top of that have to go through recognizing that I wasn't, straight, and that I had to, that I was gay, I think that really was incredibly challenging. And so for me, the antidote to that was to try and find a group to fit into, to feel validated and to feel accepted. But that was really difficult because the brown community or the Muslim community, of course, they're not going to embrace someone who's openly gay because there was all these kind of attitudes and
Yeah.
beliefs against, being, that being a sin, etc., etc. And I wasn't open in those communities either. So I wasn't like, I was like, yeah, like, I wasn't out in those communities. But obviously in the white community, there was, a lot of cultural kind of references that I just wouldn't understand, like because I didn't grow up in those environments. So like things like Christmas and Easter and all those different kind of culture points that I didn't have a frame reference. So I'd be in those conversations and I'd be laughing, but inside my head I'd be like, I don't know what I'm actually laughing at because I've never actually experienced that. So it was a really difficult time. And what I did to try and navigate through that was to try and fit in,
Mm.
and that's kind of what I did. But it was tough. That was my teenage years were not fun. Yeah, they were pretty um exhausting and scary.
Yeah. There's so much compromise that you do around who you are, and again, going back to that notion of having to police yourself, but fitting in is exhausting. When
Mm.
did you first move? When did you first shift from fitting in to experiencing a sense of belonging?
Yeah, I I think um I don't know if I'm even like there yet, if I'm being
Okay.
honest. I'm still figuring stuff out, but I feel more connected to all of the different parts of me than I've ever felt. For example, I
Mm.
pray now, and that's something that was important to me growing up, but it's something I'm actually doing a piece for HR magazine about Islamophobia because it's Islamophobia Awareness Month over November. And I'm writing about those kind of experiences of how I've almost shunned that part of my identity, especially in my 20s. And then I was in a relationship for about 7 years with someone who was an atheist. And so, and that was no fault of anyone's, but just by living with him and being with him, I was even more disconnected from my faith and my spirituality. And so I think that shift really is still happening, if that makes sense. Like it's not
Yeah.
necessarily something I'm kind of like, yeah, I get it. And I think it happened to me after 2020. So I'm very, very new into kind of leaning into all of those kind of parts of me. Because what I feel like happened as a result of everything I spoke about through my teenage years was that I almost became a caricature of myself. And I don't know if you'll get it. I think, yeah, because
Yeah.
I remember what we were talking about, going out in London back in the day. But I think at that time of my life, I was like, this is my queer life, which is like did lots of like, whatever, I'm a queer life and that's there. But like it was like I was playing a different version of myself for
Yeah.
all these different parts of my life. And so that is something that I'm still finding my feet in now, really, as a shift. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. I mean, you do it to yourself. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. You do it to yourself a little bit, and then you allow others to put it on you, right? In terms of the
Yes.
reputation. And sometimes it's fun, and other times it's really, really limiting. And it was
Absolutely.
for me, I mean, I know I do remember a conversation we've had around this as well, but it's for me it was that reputation of the drunk party boy. um, but I created that. Other people fed into it, which just reinforced
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah,
having
yeah.
to unpick that with being sober, and actually discovering so many different assets to myself that I never knew existed, and dreams and ambitions and such. So, I do understand that notion of creating a caricature of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, we spoke about this. I mean, because similar to kind of that image that, like you say, you feed into it as well. And the notion of like being a young gay man and what people think and
Yeah.
say about that it's just like, and then you feed into like in the workplace. I was always like, yeah, like I'm out every weekend. Like honestly, Neil, like I didn't want to go out every single week. Like,
But
literally,
you're
I'd
a
be
bit of
like,
a like me, you like your home and you're a bit of a homeboy, right? Yeah, no, I get it. I get that.
so I was like,
Well,
oh.
the career you've ended up in is obviously kind of like, when I was growing up, and I know I'm quite a bit older than you, but when you were growing up, um, wasn't really on the cards, right? People didn't really talk about DEI HR back then. What was the initial kind of thing? What did you want to be when you grew up, and what did you think you'd end up doing?
I mean, that's I now you talked about earlier as well a question about anecdotes of like what people might have said about the younger me. I think if I was speaking to mum, she would be like, yeah, you changed your mind every 2 seconds.
Right.
And like it's one of my toxic traits as well. Like even now, like I'm like I'll like be like, I want to do this. No, I want to do this. I want to do this. I mean, I not so much in my career, but I definitely like if I go out to have food, I'm one of those people that like I literally am like looking at the menu and I'm like, and then like I end up ordering something and then the person ordered something else that I also wanted, and I'm just looking at their food like, oh, I wish I could have. So I was constantly thinking about my career in very different ways. I mean, the first career I wanted to be at, and I kid you not, Neil, this is God's honest truth, right? Was being a botanist. So have you heard of what a botanist?
Yeah,
A
yeah,
botanist,
yeah.
like a plant scientist,
Yeah.
right? The reason I wanted to be a botanist was because I was obsessed with poison ivy in Batman. And
Uma Thurman.
yeah, oh my god, oh my god. Like, I mean, before Uma Thurman and before Batman and Robin, because that film was also like, oh my god. But before
You mean the original
Batman and Robin, I
Batmans?
used to watch. Yeah, 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 yeah. And I don't know if you watched Batman the animated series, but like she was
No.
a character on the animated series. This is a cartoon, and her sexuality and just her femininity was just like so alluring to me. I was like, I remember asking my parents for a chemistry set one year for my birthday because I wanted to boil leaves with like, and then like have like green liquid because the ethanol would come out from the leaves and stuff. So then boil the leaves and like basically walk around with these little vials of like green liquid, depending on poison ivy. So that was my first career choice. And yeah, I think since then I've changed, chopped and changed lots. I've been really experimental with like stuff. I wanted to be a chef at one point. I did work experience at this restaurant, and they shouted at me on that the first day, and I started crying. And my mum and dad had to pick me up for like the working experience. Oh, it was really a savage. I've wanted to be so many different things, but I definitely think I started. And then doctor. So I actually did medicine at university for a year to become a doctor before I realized, yeah, this isn't quite the career for me because they had
Okay.
the first time they, like dead bodies, they call them bequeathed cadavers. And so our first anatomy lesson was on like this private floor that you had like to get a key card to get into.
Yeah.
And they pulled back the sheets of this woman who donated her body to science, and that was who we were going to be working on over that kind of semester. And I fainted, so I woke
Right.
up in the nurse's
Not
station.
for you. Medicine, not for you then. The smell. My ex was at medical school, and I used to hang out quite a lot there. It was at St. George's in Tooting,
Oh,
and
okay, yeah,
I used to hang out a lot there. And just the smell from the
I know
area where the
formaldehyde.
cadavers were, yeah, yeah, yeah. Just yeah, not for me, not for me.
Yeah.
So what
Mm.
was what was early career post that then? Like what did you do from there?
So, well, I chopped and changed and kind of really wasn't. I didn't have a clear career pathway, a real clear plan. But what I did know was that I was incredibly bright, and I'm really grateful for being able to just soak things up really, really quickly and just kind of go, yeah, this and this and that and that. I always have great feedback from my teachers, being like, if you could just focus, and this I think might be some of my undiagnosed ADHD, but they were like,
I'm
if
with you.
you could just if you could just focus, you do really well. But I just lacked that kind of focus. I think so. I've stepped into like lots of different spaces. And I think when I dropped out of uni, because I went uni at Manchester, I dropped out of uni, moved to London, went to Queen Mary's to do biomed, dropped out of that, became a flyboy at GOI whilst I was doing all of this. Dropped out of like Queen Mary's, and then I started working full time. And like the first couple of places I worked in, like was banking. So I've worked at Halifax, at Lloyd's, at Santander, and I really soaked up loads there in terms of corporate. And I got the opportunity to do a rotation scheme at Lloyd's. And I did a 3-month stint in HR, and I was just fascinated. I was like, oh my God, this is I don't know, it just felt right that I felt like the variety in that department was something that I felt I could really like connect with. And then also the people, right? So working with
Mm.
people in HR, I think, people really come up to you and share really vulnerable stuff about maternity or an issue at work or a grievance. And it's like, oh my God, this is a lot of respect here in terms of like how you're handling that information. So I think that kind of shaped my early trajectory. And then from then on in, I kind of zoned in on HR. From the age of about 21, I was like, I'm going to be an HR director one day. And that's kind of what happened. So yeah, then that's kind of where I moved my career forward in that kind of space.
That journey, in HR from kind of those early days, finding yourself in HR the way you did through to being a director, and that very much is, your journey to inclusion and the Whoosh that I know now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's shaped so much of my life, actually, in terms of my career has always been a big, big part of my life. And yeah, it's gone by in so quickly, but there's been so much that's happened in that space of time. And I always like, and I don't know if other people do this, but like I always look at my life in comparison to the job that I was doing at the time, which is really weird. So like I'll think back on moments and I was like, oh yeah, I was at this place or I was doing this, and that's like the focal point has always been like where I was in my career in relation to like say when my sister got married or when I moved in with my ex or when like all these life moments. And I always think, oh yeah, I was working at X and X whilst that was happening. So it's been a massive part of my life. And I guess I'm in a really great position today actually in terms of like my trajectory in the HR kind of space and in the profession. And I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, it's massively shapes who we are. I mean, work is such a huge part of our lives. It's where we probably spend most of our lives. And for me, I wouldn't be the person I am without my work experience, the colleagues I've met from an event, the events I've got to work on, and the lessons that I've learned from people from those experiences. Um, I want to just two things around the lessons that you've learned. Has there been a moment in that career trajectory or life, say, where something has maybe felt like a failure, but
Oh
you
yeah.
look back at it now and it was a pivotal moment for you?
Oh, absolutely. There's probably more than one. I can give you so many. And whilst you say that, I'm literally looking to my wall in my house because one of the first photo frames that I put up on my house when I first moved here, after a period of a big like for me a massive huge kind of failure point in my life, was a quote that I have never forgotten since I was 17. And the reason I didn't forget it is because Rihanna, who is my absolute world, she's my goddess, she's my reason for living. She has it tattooed on her shoulder, and it's never a failure, always a lesson. And that
Okay.
is like proudly hanging on my, that's literally the first, so it's her quote, but we're surrounded by pictures of Riri. And that's always, I look at it every day because there's always lessons to learn in those moments. And so I never look at it as a failure because failure is such a loaded word, isn't it? And
Mm.
has connotations of, shame and, guilt and all of that kind of stuff. And actually, I try to look at everything that I experience, whether it's positive or negative, in a way of like, what have I learned from it? And I think I've learned more from things like my failures than when things have been good. So I think the key moment for me in that trajectory was back in 2020. So it's about 4 years ago now, that pivotal moment where so many of us life just irrevocably changed, right? So, the pandemic, lockdown, all of that happened. And I'm sure we can all look back and remember exactly where we were and what we were doing when that year kind of, took us all took over. For me, that year I was working in my second head of role for a charity. It was a broader role. I've always wanted to move outside of just being a generalist HR practitioner. So for me, that role was looking after learning and organizational development and the whole people portfolio. And I just started that job. So I literally started that job in January, and then lockdown happened in March. And so I literally had no time. I didn't even meet all of my team, in person, really, through in that kind of short window of time that we had. And that year was the worst, one of the worst periods of my life. I was on a personal level, I was really struggling with my relationship. We weren't in a good space, and we were already really in a really bad place, actually. And I think the lockdown just exacerbated that like a millionfold. And so I was increasingly unhappy. And I kept going and I kept going and I kept going and I didn't stop. I literally just was like, I'm just going to ignore everything that's happening because
Mm.
my tendency, and you'll resonate with this, Neil, because of the gay experience and especially the LGBT experiences. Like we just throw ourselves into escapism as a means of just coping with the world around us, right? So for me, I just kind of threw myself into like work and that was it really. That's all I had. And we lived in a very small place in Kennington, and literally when I say we had two rooms, it was really really intense. And so it was awful, and it got worse and worse and worse to the point that in December of 2020 I ended up God, sorry, it's just hard to kind of relive that.
Mm.
But it's basically at the beginning, I noticed that my right eye had drooped, and so I looked in the mirror. I was brushing my teeth in the morning, and my right eyelid had just drooped. And I looked in the mirror and I thought that's weird. But because I was in such a manic state at that point, I was just kind of just doing. Do you know what I did? I remember I ordered an eye patch from Amazon, like one of those pirate eye patches,
Mm.
and just was like, I'll get on with it, just with this eye patch on, and no one really knew what's going on. And it got worse and worse and worse to the point that I remember on Christmas Day, no, just before Christmas Day, Boris Johnson had obviously said, "Oh, we can all celebrate Christmas, and there's no lockdown." But then he decided, literally on the 10th hour, that like, hey, actually, the lockdown's going to take effect. So I had to rush from my where I was to my parents, try and get there before Christmas. I remember the next morning, I woke up with my parents, and I couldn't walk properly. It was really weird.
Okay.
I literally got to the end of my street and I was like hobbling, and I was like, this is very weird. So I came back into the house. I remember just sleeping for like 2 days. It got so bad that I got admitted to Guy St. Thomas. Mum and Dad dropped me back to my flat in Kennington. And from there, I had to go to Guy St. Thomas, and they thought I'd had a stroke. So at this point, I couldn't speak. I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't use the left side of my body. My speech was slurred, so it sounded like I was like really drunk. When I was talking, people couldn't understand what I was saying. I couldn't see anything properly. It was just one of the scariest moments of my life. And it took 2 months for me to recover from that episode. And still to this day, I'm monitored. So every year I have an MRI scan because they're monitoring me for symptoms of MS because they think this might be the first uh, episode in MS. Thankfully, I'm 4 years into checks, and so far I've had no more lesions on my brain because that's what they found. But I
Hmm.
think that moment really shaped who I am now in such a fundamental way because I think when I come out of that, I stepped into 2021 with this kind of like, life is too short. And
Mm.
here I am trying to play a caricature of myself, really, to just get by. And I think we've talked about this, Neil. Like, this version of like I've said this all along. Like from an HR perspective, one of the reasons I've been so passionate and so entrenched in my career is I finally found a place where I was feeling valued and accepted for what I could offer, and because of that, HR is predominantly a women working in HR. So 70% of HR professionals in England, in this country, are white women. And
Mm.
so I kind of created this caricature version of myself to assimilate into this kind of
Right.
environment where I was like almost like the gay best friend, right? And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And in that, I lost so much of myself. And it's no one's fault. I think it's just me trying to fit into the world around me. But I realized stepping into like the following year, 2021, when I was recovering from it, I was like, enough is enough. And I need to just be a really honest version of myself. And I hadn't been honest to myself for such a long time. So that really shaped me. That episode shaped me both personally and professionally. On a personal level, I actually, we ended the relationship that year. I moved in to the house that I'm in now, living on my own. And, every day is a journey for me. Every day is an opportunity for me to learn something about myself that I don't know. And I absolutely love it. I love how much I'm pouring into myself at the moment, how much time I'm giving myself. On a professional level, um, it shaped me massively in terms of like what I bring to the table. So from an HR perspective, like I realized, these are my strengths and this is what I can do really, really well. And these areas are things that I need to that I can't, and I need to just be honest about that. And I think stepping into the space, into the professional space with that sense of honesty, I don't know, it really liberated me in a way that I felt really proud of actually. And so it's been that for me, and I was just that sticks out as my most significant period of like a failure because I had my whole life mapped out at that point, and I thought certain things were going to happen and I was going to go down a road. And literally, I found myself at my age, at early 30s, not really knowing what or where I was going to be. And that kind of really shapes my entire life experiences, really, from that point on. But I wouldn't be the person that I am without having gone through that.
Yeah. It sounds super scary. Thank you so much for sharing. Just want to take a moment to acknowledge that because I do think that sometimes we just drive ourselves to breaking point and actually for what?
Absolutely.
And you've taken a life lesson from it, but actually within DEI, HR, we're supposed to role model behaviors around self-care, working boundaries, working within your limits, and we don't. We push through to burnout, to physical, to mental illness. And so I'm sure that along those ways, I hope you, and I know you do, self-care as well as those liberating feelings as much as those.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And self-care is such an important part of my life now. I couldn't live, it's almost like I can't, that is, it's non-negotiable for me, those
Yeah,
areas of,
yeah,
the gratitude journals, my journaling,
yeah,
my walks, my time with friends and socializing like that, those parts. And I know you resonates with you, like, because, those experiences that they mean that they're really my anchors, and so
yeah,
without those experiences I can't be my best self
yeah,
in any sense. And so yeah,
yeah.
really value self-care.
Well, long may that good health and those kind of clear checks keep coming through. And yeah, no, again, thank you for sharing because I having been through burnout last year and felt some of the physical ramifications of that took months to require. I know how debilitating being in a state of debilitation
There we go.
can be as well. So yeah, no, thank you for sharing. Um, I'd love to know about a person who shaped you the most along the way.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I draw inspiration from lit. I'm not joking. I draw inspiration from so many. I mean, you included, Neil. There's so many things that you do. How you boldly, loudly live your life that I am obsessed with. Like I'm like, oh my God. And you talk about my fashion earlier on. I think in part one. And I write back at you. It gives me joy when I look at your stories and your posts. I'm like, oh my God. So I literally, I feel really honored to have so many people around me, like I say, included, where I get to really draw lots of inspiration from. And I think so when I was reflecting on this question, I was like, oh God, there's so many people that I want to um mention and talk about. But I think if I was to really think about those kind of massive kind of roles and well, people, sorry, that have shaped my role and me, I guess. And I spoke about her earlier, but Rihanna is like my absolute idol.
I know how much you love Rihanna,
Yeah.
and you went as Rihanna for Halloween this year.
I did. Yes. I mean, I looked nowhere near. Like, honestly, people didn't even know that was Rihanna. Like, people were like, that was nice. What were you? And I was like, I was Rihanna from the Hard video, like a really super specific look that she gave that not many people remember. And I'm like, yeah, but I did. I did go as Riri this year for Halloween. And yeah, I mean, she is my such an inspiration. Even last year when she performed at the Super Bowl and she was pregnant, and just breaking barriers, for and breaking assumptions and just so much that I've shaped that has shaped me from Riri. And like honestly, I think I have to give her a little mention here in terms of being one of those people because I remember. So I grew up in a very, like I was saying, in Manchester, kind of Greater Manchester, and when I started clubbing, well, I was about 17, I think, and it was a very white scene clubbing, as you can imagine, right? And especially Manchester. And so there was loads of like, pop music and all that kind of stuff. And I remember like, do you remember what's her name? Cascada.
Yeah.
Evacuate. That's what I'm not going to start thinking it, but like all those songs are coming out, and Rihanna was new on the scene then, and I remember Ponde Replay was playing in the clubs, and I was
True.
like, oh my God, there's a beat here. Like this is a beat. I can get down to this. Like this is Caribbean. Like this is like island vibes. I love it. I love it. Like, and I remember just like being just besotted with this person. And I remember, so I've seen her 17 times in concert.
17.
Yeah. And I remember the first time I saw her, she was a support act to the Pussycat Dolls. And it was at the MEN, the MEN Arena. And I remember I bought tickets for the Pussycat Dolls. I did love the Pussycat Dolls, by the way, but I bought them tickets because I wanted to see Rihanna as like a support act. And now she's like, it's really in it. So I'm in awe of her journey. I think, and I remember one time as well in 2009, I think it was. Like I just moved to London or just about to move to London. And I was on a Managers for the Future program at Lloyd's TSB. And we had to do a breakout kind of group. And they said, oh, you got to write down your idol and like, talk about your idol. And so there's all these bankers, right, in the room that are talking about like these really like, serious idols that they like loved. And I remember they were like, someone was saying, like Bill Gates, and someone was saying like Richard Branson, and this is why I just they got to me and I was like, oh, mine's Rihanna. And I remember the whole room just burst out laughing. And I
Right.
felt really embarrassed then because I was like, oh, and they're like, come on, no, seriously. Like the facilitator was like, like who's your serious? And I was like, well, it is Rihanna because A, she's an incredible businesswoman. She's a billionaire.
Mm.
Now she is, but at the time, I was really, what I loved about Rihanna is her adaptability, and I really relate to that. Like, I constantly change my style, whether it's like my hair, whether it's my fashion, whether it's my approach to I'm very like adaptability is something I really value, and I mean, Ree's like embodied that in her albums, in her work. So there's just so many reasons that I love her, but most of all, I think it's that she has inspired me to think that I can make it in the world as someone who is non-white, as someone who is, who's different, and I think that's kind of what I draw a huge amount of inspiration from for Ruby.
I love that. I love that. And don't and definitely stay unapologetic about that.
I think that's
I
one of her
think,
albums.
I think yeah, it definitely is. And I think I think as queer men, we quite often find an affinity, a relatability, and that inspiration from
All right.
powerful women.
I mean, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I know that for me, absolutely. No, well, I love that. Does happiness and success look and feel how you thought it would?
Oh. Um, okay, so I guess the younger version of me. Let's come back to success because I think that's not. I don't know if I can. If I yeah, so let's come back to success. Happiness. Let's start with happiness. I was younger and you'd kind of think, well, if you get the car and you get the boyfriend and you get the house and you get the kids and the marriage and everything, then that equates to happiness, right? So I was constantly like that. Whereas actually, for me now, happiness, that quote, happiness is a destination. No, happiness isn't a destination; it's a journey, right?
Yeah.
And I draw such like that's so important and so right. Even in my darkest times, and I've had plenty of times where I would say they were really dark, especially this year included. Um, where I'm able to get joy from like I call them micro glimmers. And so like little moments in the day where I just think, oh God, I'm really happy. Like this morning I was walking up to get a coffee and I knew I was going to be recording this podcast and I was like, oh, I'm like really excited and I'm really happy. And I just remember holding on to that feeling. So I think, yes, it feels very different because I feel like you can draw happiness from every single day, really, if you practice gratitude. So I think that's definitely very different to kind of what I thought. Like I'll be like, oh well, I get all these things and then I'll be happy. I can be happy on the journey, and that can be a daily, and that is a daily thing for me. Um, Success is interesting because I think I don't know what I don't know if I would be I don't know if I could look at it and go, oh yeah, I'm successful or like I have had success. Like I think success is a subjective, word. People, for example, and that's where cultural frameworks come in. So like, with my mum and my like my family, you'd be successful if you were married and you had a house and you had all these things. And I have a house and I have a great thriving career, but I wouldn't say that I'm successful in the sense that um success feels so like final to me. Like, yeah, you've made it, like you're successful. And I don't live my life in that kind of way. I think
Yes.
of success as an like it's an ongoing thing, and that's just there's no end limit to being, to having to whatever it is. So that's why I really struggle with that term. And I think no, it's more of a ongoing thing for me as opposed to like a final thing. If that makes sense.
I love that, and and I think it definitely for me. I often talk about the fact that I am not, I've never been particularly strategic with my career. Like I'm not, I don't want to be defined by those typical landmarks in life that people do. And I like to celebrate my life wins as they
Yeah,
come along. And you know
absolutely.
what? Sometimes a life win is actually just it's actually just having a shower and actually
Absolutely.
getting up and
100%.
moving, like, because some days
Good.
are so much harder than others, and other days you celebrate the huge wins, and some days it's tapping into success being a small win. So yeah, no, I'm with you. It's a tricky one on here, and a couple of people have actually struggled to, do I see myself as successful? Um, what wins out though? For me, happiness wins out over success any day.
Absolutely. 100%. And you can find moments of joy in every single day. For me, that's happiness,
Yeah.
be able to celebrate those little things. Because I have an anxious mind. I have a very fast mind. So I'm very quick to kind of go, well, that's not right, and that's not right, and that's not right, and everything's not right. And I kind of
Yeah.
spiral sometimes. So being able to calm it down and just go, whoosh, you're good. Like you're fine. That for me, that self-soothing is happiness for me. Because I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm doing that. No one's doing that for me. I'm doing that. I'm regulating myself in a way that, and I go back to child psychology here, self-soothing is, and especially from an LGBT queer perspective as well. It's so interesting because, we almost have to self-soothe ourselves in the absence of having those kind of approaches in earlier lives. I think to be in a position now where I can do that, and that's huge. And that's for me, that's my happiness, that I have it within me to regulate myself and kind of steady myself no matter what the situation.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing it's one of the biggest things that I've ever tried to work on is that when things don't meet my own expectations, self-soothing, responding versus reacting, I think
Yeah.
all of those, if you can master those things, hey, that's a bloody win in itself. Um, my final question for this segment is looking back so far, what are you most proud of to date?
Ooh. Um, I couldn't chalk it up to like a single moment. I think I look at my pride for me is um there's honestly there's so much, and I say that with kind of almost giving myself self-love in the sense of like, oh yeah, that's an amazing achievement. um and I think for me the biggest moment is that, and I could say all the thing accolades or whatever, all the recognition of my profession and recognition of me being and they're amazing, and I am really proud. I mean, I've got my little HR most influential certificate there, and they give me strength, especially on dark days. I look up and I go, yeah, okay, look, keep going. You're doing well. You're being recognized. But I think for me, that's external validation, right? And that is it's amazing. It's really lovely to have. But for me, the proudest moment is that I'm able to recognize that within myself. I'm able to be I am most proud of the fact that I know my worth in a way that I didn't, I'd say, even 5 years ago. And that's been something that has been a concerted effort to build my self-esteem, to build my self-confidence after, that health episode that I talked about, to find my confidence. And I think that's what I'm probably most proud of, is that I have been able to cultivate a sense of belonging within myself that get stronger and more confident every day, and I'm damn proud of that. That is something that no one can take away from me.
The House of Happiness is London's ultimate sober clubbing extravaganza. We're led and delivered but created for all, whether teetotal, sober curious, or just taking a booze snooze. We love a day rave, and on a Saturday afternoon, you can expect banging house tunes, DJs on decks, dancers on podiums, and a fully stocked alcohol-free bar. Flamboyant, bold, with a glitter station to boot. We're all about safe, inclusive fun, and we even have a pre-meet so that you can make new sober buddies before you hit the dance floor. Grab your tickets from Instagram now at House of Happiness Official, and we'll see you on the dance floor. Are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Let's go.
Okay. What album, book, or movie has had a lasting impact on you?
Oh, okay. There's so many and so many. And I've spoke about Reed because I was going to go through some of her albums. But I think if I was to look at a movie, I know it sounds really weird, right? But one of the movies that's really, I know this sounds really weird, but it's the Jungle Book remake. Yeah, well, the story of Jungle Book's always been something that has been close to my heart. I'm obsessed with nature. And actually, not many people know this because it's part of my personality that or my thing that I haven't really spoken lots about. But I have an aspiration one day. I'd love to be in a position. I mean, I don't know, World Wildlife Fund. To help to lead that or be their director of people, or to be involved in the World WWF or London Zoo. I'd love to do that because I've been obsessed with conservation and nature from a young age. So Jungle Book speaks to me because, and the remake speaks to me as well. I don't know if you've seen the 2016, the act, when Disney started making the
Hmm.
real life versions of and that film in particular has a lasting impact on me just because I think Mowgli as someone who was never meant to be in this jungle, like he was never meant to belong in this jungle, and he is thriving with like this panther and this bear and like this pack of wolves that have just taken him in, and there's just something really um magical about that story that I literally and actually it's my comfort story. So whenever I'm having a really shit day, like I will literally just put that on in the evenings and I'll just watch it and it'll just make me happy. Plus also Mowgli, obviously, India is where that book is based, and I'm from Pakistan. So seeing that kind of surrounding the settings, it just kind of feels like I'm rooting and connecting to like my ancestors, and it feels like it's a really lovely story, and that film also has a real impact on me as well. So that's my number one. I'd say.
That's your movie. And what about a book?
Okay. So I read. I literally a lot of my books are non-fiction, so I
Yeah.
literally read like I geek out on things like cultural intelligence or coaching skills, like that, happiness index, and so like there's lots of really practical books that I read, but I love learning about psychology. Organizational psychology is a huge one for me. One book that does stick out for me, and this was when I was recovering from my health, is I have you and you'll know of Gabor Mate. Well, if you so he's like he's basically he worked in palliative care for a long time, which is like end of life care. So he really got to experience this, and he wrote a book called When the Body Says No, and
Okay.
it is fascinating. Like honestly, so there's all these kind of ailments that we experience as human beings, right? So like cancer, MS is one of them actually that he talks about. Lots of like debilitating, chronic, lifelong conditions that people experience. But he roots it back to childhood trauma and like stress and the impact of stress on the body. And like that book, just reading it, I don't know, I know it sounds really dark. Obviously, it's really dark topics that people were talking about, but it was also weirdly liberating when I was like, oh, okay, so this isn't just me. Like
Mm,
there's a connection here with the body and the mind. So that book really speaks to me.
okay.
Um, yeah, as like
I,
one of my
I
books.
need to check that out when the body says no. That sounds amazing. And
It's
and
a
and
really good read.
and albums, I'm just gonna list all of Rihanna's. So yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Rihanna? Do you have a favorite Rihanna album?
Do you know what? I get asked this question, and it really depends on my mood. At the moment, I'm currently kind of stepping back into my Loud era.
Good
Loud,
album.
that was when she dyed her hair red, and she
Yeah.
had like Rude Boy, and like that was such a defining moment because I remember when all these songs came out. I was in GAY, I was in London, and I was just kind of living my best queer life at that point. So those songs of that album and that point in my life, they're just like they bring me right back there. But I have a lot of love for all of her albums. It depends on different types. I think one that's really underrated is Rated R. I think Rated R is a really great album, actually.
A really good album. Some
You
really
know,
great tunes on there, standout ones.
bangers,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, I mean, yeah, those are my. I do love all of her albums, though. I don't discriminate, really.
I need to put some on. So you'll recognize this question from your podcast, which I brought to your podcast. So what's the saying you live by, and one that you'd put in the bin?
Oh God, right. So I think the saying that I live by, I mentioned it earlier, but it is definitely never a failure with the lesson. That
Yeah.
is that guides my guiding principle. It's really it kind of takes um the fear out of like doing things wrong or like, not taking a chance because actually for me it's like okay I can learn lessons from it like obviously at the moment obviously I'm starting my business and so with that there's lots of things that I'm doing for the first time and I'm like I don't know if I'm going to do this right or not but I'm like just do it Wish because what's the like you're going to learn from it whether it lands or whether it doesn't you're going to learn a lot from it and so that's real something that I really kind of live by as well and I am a bit of a risk taker so I think for me that kind of helps me and gives me peace of mind and safety when it comes to kind of taking kind of risks. Do you know one thing that I would say throw in the bin is bring your whole self to work. I hate that saying with a passion. I'm on a lifelong campaign to dismantle that ridiculous phrase of like, bring your whole self to work. Let's bring our whole selves to work. Let's not. And I think that bit for me is really, when I hear people say that, I think it's there's so much that dredges up for me. I think we are dealing with conflict in the workplace unlike, I guess, at a very volatile time for humanity. There is so
Mm.
much going on. Politics is shaping our rights, especially for people in marginalized communities. You have wars breaking out in the world. You have genocides taking place. You have so much in the world that is affecting different communities in different ways. So for people in the workplace to ask their employees to bring their whole self to work is incredibly dangerous and incredibly um, un. There's no reason for why people would want to do
Yeah.
that. A, because there's guardrails aren't there. Of course, you need to bring your authentic versions of yourself to. So I always talk about bringing your best self to work, right?
Yeah.
I'm
I love
thinking
that.
about that because actually that creates a reason for you to actually, be having bringing those kind of having being that brilliant version of yourself but work isn't a place where we need to bring every part of ourselves because work isn't every part of ourselves
Yeah.
work is one part of our lives which are made up of so many different things so that is one saying that I hate and
Straight
that
in
I
the
was
bin.
throwing
Straight in the bin. Quite frankly, I've had some colleagues over the years. I'd rather they hadn't brought their
yeah.
whole selves to work. So,
So
yeah,
true.
no thanks. What's been the best adventure of your life so far?
Oh my God, so many. I love an adventure. I think for me it would be like, you know what? I've got a cat called Nala, and like I know that's not she's been the biggest adventure of my life. Like honestly, watching her grow up from being she's actually the same as when she was a kitten, but I got her when she was a kitten, and I learned so much about me as well as a cat dad, as well as Nala, and just having the joy of like watching her and like watching her grow up, but also like kind of learning about Bengals and about her like her as like getting to know her personality as honestly that's a daily adventure because
Yeah.
she's just an amazing little furball she is and I love her to pieces and she's just like my world so I think that's my adventure that's probably my I want to say PG universal rated adventure
Ah,
probably probably not the right podcast to talk about like like other perhaps darker not darker but like more um yeah, like different adventures that I guess I've been on over the years.
this podcast is definitely not fucking PG rated. You can talk about whatever the hell you want on here, but Nala is. But we'll take Nala. Nala's very cute.
Nala is the one.
So big question: what three words would you use to describe you and your origin story?
Oh, I think I would go with I think I would say loud. because I have like, I'm just loud. Like, I'm loud in terms of how I live my life, but I'm also,
Can testify Woosh is loud.
also, I think I wrote a post about my dirty laugh. I've got the dirtiest, loudest
You
laugh.
do.
And like, I definitely think loud is a word I kind of take with pride now. I used to feel really self-conscious about my loudness, I guess, and adapt to different spaces. But I think as the older I get, I'm just like, no,
Yeah.
this is who I am. And some people are gonna love that, some people are gonna absolutely hate it, and that's cool. Like that's got nothing to do with me. That's really like a you thing, not a me thing. So loud is definitely up there. I'd say energy as well. Every time I speak to people, whether it's people I know, my friends, my family, or even people I've just met, one thing that I always get feedback on, and I think it's something I don't really appreciate myself as much, is energy. It's always
Mm,
like, oh my God, you've got bags of energy, you've got tons of energy. Even on days where I'm like, I'm literally scraping through here until the end
yeah.
of the day. So I just go to bed. But someone's like, oh my God, you've got so much energy. And I'm like, okay, yeah, great. So I do think that's something that I'm proud of in the sense of constantly being a source, especially for people who, life is full of shit and life is so dark and there's so much going on right now and it's just a really, it's all times. If I can brighten up someone's day by throwing in a little bit of energy, then that would be that I think that's definitely a positive attribute that I would say uses to describe me. A final word to describe me, I guess, would be um Hmm. Something maybe a word that I don't think people would associate too much with me, but I guess there is an element of me. I don't know if the word introvert is the right word, but like I guess there's a massive part of me that's like not as extroverted as people would think I was from like kind of interacting with me. And there's that part of like I don't know what it's called, solitude, maybe perhaps that's a definite good word. Like I love my own space. I love being able to just talk to myself. I know it sounds really weird, but I love talking to myself. And it's kind of like I just basically I love playing back my day and like, oh yeah, that was good. And I write things down. But that's because I love my own space and I love my own, my own energy. And so I think that kind of solitude, I don't know if that's the right word, but like silence, solitude, you know, just being kind of drawing my energy from within. I think that's
Yeah.
that's something that I've used to describe me.
And I think when you look back to those moments where you talked about what are you most proud of today and finding that inner center of belonging, sense of belonging in yourself and the
Yeah,
pride that you find in that, it definitely taps into that. So yeah, maybe it's solitude or solace or,
yeah,
I get the vibe. We can suss that out later, but yeah,
yeah.
I'm
It's
vibing
a
with it.
feeling. Yeah.
Let's fast forward a little bit. What exciting things do you have coming up? Obviously, Whoosh Limited.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's like a daily source of excitement. I have like a book that I literally jot all my ideas down on. I'm literally like, I feel so excited about 2025. Like, I feel really, really I'm just so, so excited to kind of work with as many clients as possible to help them supercharge their people and culture agendas for their organizations. And I'm really stepping into my power in the sense of like, um, being a credible person, but also like being able to communicate with different stakeholders, understand different needs and stuff. So that bit, starting my own business has been one of the biggest joys I think of my life, and I'm really excited to see how far I can take that over the next kind of year or so. I think kind of some of the things kind of in the mix. I am going to be doing like a launch event, and you're obviously going to be invited.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and that's going to be amazing because it'll be a real moment to kind of, I guess, promote my business. But I'm also going to be having lots of different events that I'm going to be looking at over the next year in collaboration to kind of just, I think, to step into the new year with the right kind of energy and the right mindset in terms of like where we need to kind of get to from a people and culture perspective. I have my weekly newsletter now launched as well. That's really exciting. I get to really think about how I'm sharing that with my audience and what I'm saying. So that's really exciting. Um, uh, I think that just generally, I'm just like the exciting thing is to just watch this space because hopefully Wish Limited is gonna, you know, take over the world from an HR perspective, and I'm just excited to see where that goes. Really,
Can't wait to see it, and I'll definitely be there. You touched a little bit on it there, but what brings you joy?
Oh God, oh God, so much. Well, I think it's also seasonal. So, like, there are things that are bringing me joy right now. Well, firstly, as we know, the temperatures have plummeted this week, which is ridiculous. And I literally can't find my gloves. So I literally was walking back this morning, and I was literally like, they're gonna like my fingers are gonna fall off. But I actually weirdly love this time of year. I mean, I know I've spoke about some of the traumas that I've been through around this time of year in my past. But generally, I think this is such a lovely time of year because it's a stiller time of the year. And like, I feel like that's a really nice opportunity to just take stock and reflect. And I think it's come at a great time for my consultancy. But joys would be, I mean, some of the things, I mean, I love gratitude. In the morning, I will look out my patio door and I will just like stare out into the world and I'll spend 5 minutes thinking, oh God, like what am I super grateful to? And I'll do that with a nice cup of tea. So just a nice little atmospheric vibe. I love, like I said, my own time, journaling. I love that. But equally, and you'll know this, I love socializing and I love spending time with loved ones and love like just letting my hair down and just being my full queer self. And I think those moments are such joy, especially as we get older. And those moments are so precious because like they are, we take them for granted almost when we're in our earlier on in our earlier part of our lives. I think for me to just be able to have moments like that, in safe spaces and just to
Mm,
live my full queer self, oh, that's like huge joy for me. Um, so those are some of the things that give me joy.
love it. I love it. That you're bigger, loud, energetic self.
Yeah.
What takeaways do you have for anyone wanting to carve out a career in HR or inclusion? Bit of both.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's such a, so I was at, so I speak to students about, careers and career pathways. And I think the things that I wanted to just mention when it comes to, um, looking at like how to build meaningful careers in in this kind of, in both ED&I and HR or combined actually, is the first thing is, let's start with ED&I. A lot of people who are shaping the ED&I world and landscape are using that have lived experience of being from a different community and a different background or being from a different community. Be really careful about how you are utilizing your own lived experience and what that brings with it, including the trauma and all of that kind of baggage that brings with it, and how you are making sure you're putting in healthy boundaries in the workplace, because so many organizations will be inadvertently or intentionally will be quite performative with their agendas, and it's really difficult it, to be a new starter in ED&I or an HR perspective and to kind of play into that, because I did, I'll certainly say I definitely like kind of wanted the, oh great, like that's great for me, I'll go and do this event or I'll go and speak at this play event or this that and the other, but actually what I was realizing is that no internal change was really happening. So just be really careful and clear about where you're stepping into and how much of yourself you're giving to these agendas. And I'd almost start by looking at the organization, look at Glassdoor, look at companies, look at feedback that you're getting from like maybe social media and other places to gauge kind of what the culture is internally
Mm,
and just kind of where they are. So do your homework with that kind of stuff in terms of where you're kind of working. Recognize that as an ED&I person, you may be from a lived experience, but there is a difference between having lived experience of an issue and being an expert in driving cultural change with that specific issue. I'll use an example of myself. I'm brown. I'm Pakistani, but race equity for me is something I've had to really develop a deep-seated awareness and understanding of, and through working, through education, through qualifications as well. So be really careful about how you're guiding your organizations through change and do the work. Just
mm,
having lived experience isn't necessarily enough for people to kind of champion the agendas. So I think it's about doing the work and kind of getting your qualifications and credentials, because that's then backed with your expertise and that's kind
yeah.
of going to make you more effective. And I think the third thing is get a network. So this is a really daunting lonely space sometimes. You know this because you're in the same world as
Yeah.
I'm in. And I think without my network, I would literally lose my shit. Like I literally would like unravel. And it's sometimes just having a network that you can share, bounce ideas, almost offload with as well. And so join networks. There's loads of networks out there. I mean, I know we create space. You're cultivating networks in terms of the kind of events that you're bringing people together. That's great example for for people who are listening who are in the LGBT community. There's loads of places that you can tap into. So please make sure you get a network because this work takes all of us to kind of work together to kind of support each other. And having a network is a really powerful way of making sure you've got that support.
Thank you so much. Wow, so many takeaways there. Boom, boom, boom. Love it. Final question for you, Whoosh, is do you have any words of encouragement or wisdom for anyone out there to help them get to wherever they're going?
It's a marathon, not a what's
It's
that
a
saying? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so number one is consistency, right?
right.
So really cultivate a sense of consistency and just keep going. And so that bit for me, I could say loads of other things to support this, but I think if I was learning something from this year from setting up my own business as well, consistency is key. So make sure that you are consistent in how you're building your kind of trajectory and keep going.
Keep going. Whoosh by name, whoosh by nature. This has been, I have loved spending this time with you as always. And thank you so much for being a guest on Pause and
Oh,
Rewind.
it's been an absolute honor. Thank you so much for having me, Neil. I love this podcast and thank you for inviting me on.
I loved spending that time with Whoosh. I always love spending time with Whoosh in whatever capacity, and it was great to get to know him even more. From hearing about Little Whoosh through to that career trajectory, which has taken him to where he is in the field of HR, and his dreams for that. Hearing about Little Whoosh wanting to be a botanist because of his love of poison ivy in Batman, through to his love of Rihanna. Just so so much that I have learned. And I think one of the things that Whoosh is really part of his value is going from those days of fitting in and being a caricature of himself, whether early days or in his career, through to cultivating that sense of belonging that he spoke about and finding that within the community and within himself as well. And those proud moments that he talked about where he made a concerted effort to build up his own self-esteem and self-confidence and to the amazing person that he is today. The three words that Whoosh proudly uses to describe himself in his origin story: loud, energy, and solitude. And it's amazing to see someone so out there and confident with a love of people also um, find that sense of solitude within themselves, and you can see how much work Whoosh has done to reach that point of peace, whether that's at home with his cat Nala and just practicing gratitude, and again just the way that he shows up. Whoosh is super excited to step into 2025. And I loved this quote. He's stepping into his power as a credible person in what he does, and yeah, just loved that. So many gold nuggets, and from the saying that he lives by, never a failure, always a lesson, through to happiness as a journey, not a destination. Whoosh, it is a pleasure to know you and call you my friend. Thank you so much for being a guest on Pause and Rewind. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please do like, subscribe, share with those you think might benefit from listening, comment. And again, let's help bring these conversations and these amazing guest stories to a much wider audience. They deserve to be heard and celebrated. So I'll be back with you soon. This is my last episode before the Christmas break. I'm going to be taking a break until the end of January, maybe February, just to give it a rest. But I'll be back in the new year with more stories. Thank you so much. It's been amazing rolling this podcast out, and it's not stopping just yet. So enjoy. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic holiday, and I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.